Hello, my name is Meredith Kutz, a Professional Development Associate here at NACE. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Captivate and Help Your Gen Z Students in Under 20 Minutes. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ali Danziger and Joy Hargan, Director of Professional Success at Ampersand. Take it away.
Oops. Here we go. There's the non-mute. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. We are so excited to connect with you all today. Thank you all so much for taking the time, and we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Ali Danziger. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ampersand. My background, I previously had a marketing agency for 12 years, and in that company, my talent acquisition strategy was hiring people right out of college for internships or entry-level hires. I had a lot of frustrations with the education to employment skills gap that I was seeing, and in the height of COVID, started Ampersand as a solution to that. I'll go in a little bit more detail about that in a second, but first, let me pass it off to my colleague, Joy.
So much, Ali. My name is Joy Haugen. I'm the Director of Professional Success at Ampersand, and I absolutely love what I do. I have a background in management and tech. I'm a certified coach, and I love helping people identify where they are and what they want to do and building tactical plans on how to get there. And really thinking about what our mission is at Ampersand and flipping the switch on job searching. And I'm so excited for today's conversation because we've worked with over 1,000 Gen Z professionals, and we're going to dive into all of that today. But before we get started, I would love just to know a little bit more about you. So it's great to see everyone in the chat box of where you're from. If you could also add, what is your number one motivation for today's conversation? And are there any other struggles that you are having when it comes time to connecting with Gen Z? So go ahead, throw that in the chat box. We have several members from the Ampersand team here today who will be chiming in over the chat box. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll respond to them as well there. Back over to you, Ali.
Great. So just a little bit about Ampersand so you know where we're coming from. Ampersand is an internship, recruiting, and training platform, and we are focused on bridging the gap between businesses, young professionals, and universities. The way we do that on the young professional side is we have over 50 hours of asynchronous job skills training. Started with me as a business owner, all the things that I wish my young professionals knew coming into the workforce. And then we worked with amazing experts, PhDs in pedagogy, et cetera, to make sure that that content is streamlined, catered to Gen Zers. No video is over 3 minutes. There's animation, there's gamification, et cetera. And then we have ongoing mentorship throughout that entire experience. And once the young professional completes that curriculum, we then certify them as an Ampersand certified professional and put them through basically a dating app to connect those young professionals with businesses and paid internship opportunities. For businesses, we offer them access to vetted, trained talent. They don't have to sift through thousands of resumes, and we're actively connecting those businesses with the right talent for their internships or entry-level roles. And then for universities like yourself, we work with you to help you reach students where they are. This asynchronous platform makes it is incredibly accessible to all of your university students and helps you guys focus on the actual content, the actual things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, and let us handle like the reaching out to and engaging with all of your students. So here's just like a quick preview of what it looks like. We call it the AMP HQ, the software platform where we host all of those lessons, all the content, et cetera. You can see it's really engaging, and then there's Zoom conversations as well for those daily one-on-one and group mentoring opportunities. As Joy said, we've actively worked with over 1,000 Gen Zers in the past couple of months. We've touched over 5,000, and we're really aware of the challenges that Gen Z faces coming into the workforce. They're the most diverse workforce that has ever been around. And by 2025, 75% of the workforce will include Gen Zers. They're tech savvy, but they crave human interaction. And that can be a really challenging balance for both university professionals as well as future managers. They're pragmatic. From the experiences that they have faced throughout their life, they are craving security and salary. And at the same time, they're entrepreneurial. They want to shape their own futures. And so we'll talk through some of the experiences that we've had with Gen Zers through this asynchronous Zoom world and all the changes that are happening in our lives and how we've been able to engage them. So I'll pass that back over to Joy.
Thank you, Allie. So we just want to introduce you to Nora. Nora went through the Ampersand program, and she is a really great representation of the Gen Z professionals that we have the opportunity to work with every single day. When Nora was a kid, she wanted to be an astronaut. She is an overachiever, loves to learn. She graduated at the top of her class. And not only did she just take the classes that were required for her major, but she went over to other schools and took additional classes. And when we worked with her, she recognized that she had a lot of skills, that she had a lot of knowledge, but she was struggling with how to apply that knowledge in the real world, in the workforce, while also making an impact. And that is a thing that most Gen Zers are really excited about and aware of, is that they want to make an impact. They're not job searching just to have a job. They want to make an impact and work with organizations, whether it be themselves or with other organizations that make a valuable impact in their work. So when we think about this big, bold question of what do you want to be when you grow up? There's a lot of emotions in this weighted question, right? When I was a kid, I wanted to be a ballerina. And I came out of the womb about 6 feet tall, and I was told that ballerinas are very short. So I thought, well, what's the next profession? Well, ER was really big at that time. And I thought, well, that's great. Maybe I'll be an ER doctor. I quickly realized that I pass out looking at x-rays and George Clooney would not be my boss. So I thought, well, what's next, right? And I would think about even to this day, I love what I do. I love getting to make an impact. I love the team that I work with. But if you were to ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up, Joy? I'd be like, well, that's a great question. I'm not really quite sure. Let me think about that. And so we want to really think about how can we make this question to be valuable and to be impactful. So when we think about Nora, right, when she is asked the question of what do you want to be when you grow up, her response was, I'm not quite sure. I know I have a lot of experience. I've done a lot of learning in my academics, but I'm not really quite sure what that really means. I know I need a job and I know what I need to do to get a job, but I'm just not quite sure how I can translate my skills and what's important to me. So in today's session, we are going to do exactly that. We are going to help answer the question and translate that from what do you want to be when you grow up, to take away the emotion and the weight and flip the dialogue to what are you looking for in a career? And that is the key question. You all are on the front lines of helping this next generation. And so is Ampersand. That's one thing that I love about my job. And yet I know when we are working in the front lines, there's a lot of emotion. You all probably have a lot of excitement. You're recognizing there's a lot of opportunity, but that can also come with a lot of nerves. And so we're going to walk through an exercise that you can work with your students on how to answer this question of what are you looking for in a career? And that's exactly what we do with the Ampersand curriculum. As Allie mentioned earlier, our curriculum is based on not just how to job search for their first internship or their first job, but we really flip the dialogue on how to job search for the rest of their career. And one thing that I like to think about is how do we job search in a way that makes it matter? We all know what we need to do to get a job, right? We know we need to craft a resume, maybe have a cover letter if it's asked for, get through the interview process. But if we're going to spend all of the time and energy it takes to go through the steps to get a job, when we think about the perspective of Gen Z, when they really want to make an impact and they want it based on what's important to them, going down the list of the job boards and doing easy apply is not going to work. We all know we can apply to 1,000 jobs and it turns into a numbers game, right? And we show up, the first response that we get that says, yes, I'd love to have a conversation from you with an organization. All of a sudden, overnight, we have these skills that we didn't have yesterday, but because somebody said yes to us, that they want to talk more, we're like, oh, okay, I can do this job. So again, we want to flip the switch on how to make this a meaningful job search. So for the purpose of today's conversation, I would love for you to think about all of the roles that you have done. Now, if you're newer in your career, that is okay. You can think about your academic experiences, your volunteer experiences. If you're more senior in your career, think about the last 5 roles that you've had. When you think about doing this with your students, it's okay that if you might think, well, Joy, they're a student, they don't have a lot of professional experience, and that's okay. We can leverage their classroom experience. We can leverage what they did in high school, their class projects, their volunteer experiences. So I want you to think specifically, for just this moment, I want you to think specifically about the day-to-day tasks. So if we think about, what do you actually do? When you go down the list of those tasks that took up your time and energy and effort, whether it's the past 5 years, whether it's the past 5 roles, again, we're thinking about your volunteer experiences, your academics, etc. Maybe you built a coaching model for a career development center at X school, or maybe you helped 400 incoming college students pick their initial major. Maybe in your volunteer experience, you served breakfast to seniors every Saturday. I have a background in ed tech, and when I think about my own past 5 roles, I did global operations and bringing together coaching models from across around the world. In Ampersand, I have the great pleasure of working with some of the best and the brightest. And together we get to make impacts with Gen Z. But what does that really look like on the day-to-day tasks? It's a lot of emails, it's a lot of program planning, it's a lot of spreadsheets. So when you think about the roles that you have done, I want you to think about those tasks. And now I want you to take a little bit of a step back, and I want you to think about those 5 experiences a little bit more holistically. When you think about all of those things, what are the things that you've enjoyed about each role? You don't need to go through your resume and say, okay, well, in job A, I did X, Y, and Z in those 10 tasks. In job B, I did these 10 tasks. But think about the 5 roles holistically and think through, what is everything that you've enjoyed? Do you like the team structure? Did you like the fact that you were paid your worth? Did you like the fact that you had a really engaging manager? Did you like the fact that you had a clear path of learning and development? For me, I really enjoy when I have the ability to be strategic and to be creative and to take those big, bold ideas and really drill down in them into what do we need to do every single day to make them a reality. So think about what you've enjoyed. If we think about Nora, if we think about Nora's experience, she really enjoyed the times when she got to work and collaborate with her peers in class projects. She enjoyed when her instructors and professors would take different approaches to learning, if they utilized YouTube or other mechanisms. When she was doing her volunteer work, she enjoyed taking action. She was a builder. She liked having the option to dress up or to dress down. So again, when you think about everything that you have enjoyed in your own experiences, I want you to be specific. It can be as simple as, I liked the fact that I got to dress up every day, or I liked the fact that I could wear sweats and nobody knew because I was in a computer all day. So be specific with the things that you've liked. Now you might be thinking, okay, Joy, what's next? And I'm pretty sure I'm just going to give it away. I want you to think about everything that you haven't enjoyed. This list might be a little bit easier, it might be a little bit longer, but I want you to be specific. Again, maybe you didn't like the fact that you didn't have a team to collaborate with. Maybe you didn't like the fact that your boss was a micromanager, or that you weren't paid your worth, or there wasn't a clear line of growth and development. In my experience, I haven't enjoyed the roles that I need to be showing up at a certain time and I have to sit in a chair and leave at a certain time. I didn't enjoy roles where I wasn't able to collaborate and to brainstorm and to think big with other people. I don't enjoy roles where I don't really see what the next steps are, where I don't see where my everyday impacts or tasks are going to grow and impact at a larger level. If we think about Nora, the things that she did not enjoy were when she didn't have the opportunity to collaborate with her peers. She didn't like the fact that she lacked a variety of classes in her previous major, which led her to change her majors and continue to take classes elsewhere. She didn't like the fact that in certain classes, she just had to read a textbook and write a report. She didn't like the fact when she didn't have the ability to take an active role in the groups that she belonged to. And when working with us, she said she didn't really like the fact that she couldn't really translate what she was learning in the classroom to how she could make a valuable impact in the work that she wanted to do. So these are some simple but loaded questions, right? When we think about our past experiences, what we liked, what we didn't like, being specific. When we take that bird's eye view, we can start to say, okay, in this job, I liked this. In that job, I didn't like this. And again, with your students, if they don't have a lot of professional experiences through internships or elsewhere, that's okay. We can leverage their academics. We can leverage the community groups. But for the next part, I want you to take
Real quick, wait, before we move on, can I just chime in and say that the tool that we use, this one, that's something that everyone on this call can be using. And even if right now you want to be writing those things down and thinking about what your roles, your likes and your dislikes as a way to, really start thinking about your own career path. But feel free to use this tool yourself with these professionals on Zoom calls with them, because it can be a really engaging two-way dialogue. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to mention that. Keep going.
Yeah, nope. And that's great. Because again, as Ali just said, this is a tool that you can use. It's short and sweet and simple, and it's really easy to implement this into your own everyday conversations with your students. So we've gone through what we've liked and what we've disliked. I want you to think about you as a human being. Take away our professional identity for just a minute. And I want you to think about what's really important to you as a human being. Do you value adventure? Do you value commitment, loyalty, learning? On the screen are just some examples of values. It doesn't have to come from this list. But I want you to write down, or I want you to think about what's really important to you. Again, at that core level of being a human being. For me, I value creativity. I value empathy. I value courage. What's really important to you as a human being? If we think about Nora, what she valued was courage and collaboration and trust. She valued kindness and curiosity and integrity. So these things are really important to her as an individual. So if you are taking notes, whether old-fashioned pen and paper or modern day on a Google Doc or whatever, or in your head, what do you notice? What do you notice when you think about what you've enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed, and what's really important to you as a human being? What are the high-level trends that stand out? What you might notice is that if we look at Nora's likes and dislikes and personal values, if we take that, again, that bird's eye view, what you might notice is that she has a trend that overall funnels up into collaboration, curiosity, and action. Now, again, we're looking at these words and we're not saying, okay, so where am I finding curiosity? Where am I finding action? We're looking for those high-level trends that represent our likes, our dislikes, and our personal values. These are the three things that we call our non-negotiables. These are the things that we know we have to have in order for us to feel engaged, motivated, and excited to show up and be our best self. So when you think about yourself, you might look at your list of likes and dislikes and your human values, and you might think, oh, there's so many. How do I narrow it down? Right? And it's not to say the entirety of the list is extremely important. But if you look at your list, what are the top three things that stand out to you? What are your non-negotiables?
Joy, does it have to be three? Like when I think about myself, I have one that it is a huge non-negotiable, and it's growth. If I am working in a situation where there's no growth opportunities, if my colleagues aren't growth minded, if my family isn't wanting to grow and develop, and I don't mean grow in terms of more babies, but grow and expand their learnings and just become better people, it can be really frustrating for me, or friends. So that's my like one and only, but do I need to have more?
Yeah, that's a great question, Allie. So you can funnel it into like, you can rank them in 1 to 3. For some of us, we might say, oh, 3 seems too limiting. So you can broaden that list to 10. Or if you're like, no, in your situation, that everything funnels up through growth, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's work, it's okay to have one. But sometimes, especially when we think about Gen Z, they don't want to be limited. They're like, well, the world is my oyster. Sometimes this is important and sometimes that is important. And so when we think about how do we understand and leverage this to connect with Gen Z, I generally recommend if you can get it to 1, fantastic. If you're feeling a little like, oh, I don't want to choose just one, because what if I learn something, or what if I meet somebody that exposes me to a different perspective? We don't want to feel too limited. But at the same time, that on the opposite spectrum, you might think, well, I have 10 things that are just equally important. And that is when when we are asked, well, what do you want to do in your career? And we're not clear because 10 things are important. And we all know like 10 things is a long list to be looking for when we're job searching. So ideally, we do want to get it to 1, or we want to know that like our most important thing, our number 1 is growth in all things. And Allie, I loved how you phrased that, because that's that high level trend, right? The high level trend is growth. But underneath growth, specifically, it looks like this in your family life. Specifically, growth looks like this in your job. And so that's what we want to think about when we think about the high level trends, is what does it funnel up into?
And Joy, another question, and we didn't plan on this, but as we're going through this, I'm just thinking about questions that other people in the audience might have. Do your non-negotiables change throughout life? And especially a Gen Zer, they're, maybe 18, maybe 20 years old. I changed a lot and have learned a lot about myself since then. How do you deal with like the changing of your non-negotiables or your values as you learn more?
Yeah, that's a great question, Allie. So at the heart of this, there might be some changes, but because this is really based on what's important to us and our values, it's probably going to be pretty consistent. And again, this is what flips the dialogue from going down the job boards and just applying to any job out there and saying, ooh, I hope I can be good at this. And then when we get that email response from a recruiter that says, I'd love to have a phone screen or an interview, again, suddenly we have all of these skills that we didn't realize we had. The beauty of
interest and like, okay, sure, I'll go work for this type of company or this type of boss because I really need a job.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the traditional job search, right? We just need a job. Whether we have student loans, whether we have family obligations, we just need a job. So it doesn't matter what it is, I just need a job. And we also have to, when we think about that model, we have to take into account how desperate we are, right? Because if we are desperate for a job, it doesn't matter what our values are. It doesn't matter if it's going to be important or if we're going to make an impact. We just need a job, whatever that might be. And again, when we bring this back from a Gen Z perspective, they're wanting to make an impact. So making an impact with just any job is not really going to be in alignment, which is why there's so much focus here on what's important to you as a human being. Because what you might notice, if my 3 non-negotiables are creativity and strategy and communication, I know that I have to have those 3 things in my day-to-day, in my role, or I'm going to get the shiny object syndrome and start to think, oh, that organization looks really great, or that job sounds a lot cooler than what I'm doing right now. But at my core, if this is based on what's important to me, I might grow and expand my knowledge base as I grow and go through different experiences. But I'm going to know what's really important to me. And so again, this might change over time, but it should be pretty stable, because at the end of the day, when we reflect on our experiences, when we reflect on whether it's professional or personal, if it's important to us, we're going to be more willing to put in 110%. We're going to be more willing to say, I'm going to go the extra effort because I care about the end result. If it's not in alignment with our personal values, 80% is going to be okay. We're not going to be more apt or willing to say, it doesn't matter if I have to work a 15-hour day. I'm going to work an 8-hour day, and regardless of what happens is where I'm going to end it. Does that help,
Yeah.
Allie?
Yeah, I think let's now talk about how we put that in action.
Yeah, this is great. So when we think about how do we put this in action, and again, this flips the dialogue of how we job search. The goal of this is when we can answer when we get asked the question of what do you want in your next career, we suddenly don't get nervous and be like, oh, let me figure it out, right? Let me see what I need to do. We think about this in terms of how we structure our time and energy in our job search. Knowing your 3 non-negotiables is going to impact and be put into action in every single stage of the job search. And again, it flips the practice. We're no longer saying I can be a Jill of all trades and do anything for any organization. Doesn't matter. It's just a job. We're flipping the switch. So when we think about the very beginning stages, when we're looking at our organizational research, when you are working with your students to say, what is exciting? What type of role or what type of organization or company do you want to work for? Well, great. Let's get clear. What's really important to you? If we think about Nora's non-negotiables, she's going to be looking for roles that have action and collaboration, allow her to grow and feed her curiosity. She's going to want to collaborate with others. So that leads to the question of like, well, how do you figure that out, right? Like, how do you know if an organization has collaboration and takes action and allows you to learn and grow? Because obviously some of these things you kind of have to get into the organization to know if that exists. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about our curriculum at Ampersand is we work with our pros to identify what questions do you need to ask, right? We give our pros the skills and the abilities to do informational outreach, informational interviews based on outreach. So rather than saying, I'm gonna do some research on the website and apply and then I'll find the information out after the fact, before they're even applying, they're reaching out to people who work at the organization and asking them specific questions that can help them identify, does this organization meet my criteria based on my non-negotiables? For example, if we think about Nora and one of her non-negotiables is curiosity, she's going to be able to ask in an informational interview, can you tell me like how often am I going to be able to learn and grow? What's the structure? How often do I get to collaborate with other team members? So again, when we think about the non-negotiables in this stage, it's really giving us a roadmap for, rather than putting our resume out there for 100 jobs and going through all of the steps that organizations put their candidates through. We've worked with organizations who have a 2-step process. They do a phone screen and an interview, and then they're hired. We've worked with organizations who have 15 rounds of interviews. And I mean, we all kind of know what do you really need to know that you're not getting in 15 conversations? But if the candidate, if the pro is going to have to go through 15 rounds of interviews, we want to make sure that it's worth it, that they're excited, and that's going to be aligned with them wanting to make an impact. So when we think about the next step of the job search, it's really defining our why, right? When somebody says, well, what do you want to do? Or what is the next step in your career? And the response is like, oh, I don't know. I'm not really quite sure. I just want a job. That's not helpful, right? When our students say that, it's like, well, great. Do you want to do X? Do you want to do Y? I don't know. If it's just a job, it's just a job. But pretty soon if we are leveraging our non-negotiables in talking about ourselves and our personal pitch and how we talk about our skills and our impacts, pretty soon we are getting to the goal of job seeking, which is recruiters and hiring managers saying, tell me more. I want to know more about you. That is the goal. At each step of the job search process, we want to make sure that the person on the other side of the table is saying, oh, tell me more. I'm going to look at your resume that's been crafted with bullets that stand out and show impact. Tell me more. Let's get you through the interview process. If we're talking through with leveraging our non-negotiables, we're telling them, we're defining our why, and we're thinking about from the interview standpoint, we're no longer talking about what we think we can do in an organization that we've never really worked for. We're talking about the impacts that we've already made through our academics, through our volunteer work, through our roles. So again, we're leveraging our non-negotiables through each step of the process. So in the next section for interviews, and when we think about the engagement factor, if Nora, so when Nora's in an interview and she talks about the impacts that she has already made versus what she thinks she can do in an organization that she's never worked for. So she went above and beyond her core requirements. She took classes in other schools to have a broader foundation of skills and knowledge. And what that inspired her to do was to build an app to make it as easy as possible for other students to connect with each other. And pretty soon, if we're having a conversation about how she did this and building on what she did, that's giving the employer more insight. Oh, of course, I want somebody like Nora to make broader impacts. I want Nora to take initiative. I want her to connect with other members of the team so we can get more insight to what's going to keep our workforce engaged. So this is why it is so important to think about what our non-negotiables are, what makes them unique to us, and it filters through the entirety of the job search process. Now, again, Steve, to your point in the chat box, sometimes our students just need a job, and that, and we recognize that, right? There are circumstances that we're like, yeah, later down the road, we're probably going to figure out the whys and make the impacts, et cetera. And those specific instances, we want to help them find a job that's going to meet their criteria. But at the same time, you all are on the front lines of making big impacts. And again, we know that can evoke a lot of emotions, both positive and nerve-wracking. So when a student is like, Steve, I just need a job. I don't really care what it is. I just need you as my academic counselor to help me get a job. This exercise is short and sweet so that it doesn't have to be this whole drawn out process, but you quickly figure out, okay, well, let's figure out what's important to you. Think about what you've enjoyed about your academics. What clubs are you involved in? What organizations? And when you are doing that, it goes back to those specific tasks. What did you enjoy when you were doing it? What made it seem like the time was flying by, right? If you're working on a report and you're like, wow, I really got into this section of the report, and I recognize that I love to write, and when I am writing, it seems like it's 10 minutes. So this is a tool that you can leverage. It doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming, daunting task, but it's getting them, okay, so what did you enjoy? You enjoyed writing? Well, let's see if we can get roles. Maybe there's some copyright roles that are out there. Maybe there's some social media content roles. So ideally, you are helping them translate, because that's a lot of what happens with Gen Z, similar to what we saw with Nora, is they're not able to make the connections themselves to making an impact in their mind of what that impact means to what they can do as a job. So often we get overwhelmed with the impact. We got to change the world. We got to go to the moon. We got to create a vaccine. But it's identifying that the impacts that they make can be done at their level.
And helping to translate that impact. Yes, it might just be writing some small social media posts, to your previous example, Joy, but how that then impacts the larger organization too. They don't understand that transition. It's a lot of what we're doing with Ampersand, but something that you can easily do too. How small social media posts and just, couple lines of content, which is something that you as an individual so greatly enjoy, how that translates to larger corporation goals and helping your boss, in that corporation, achieve their marketing challenges or overcome various challenges in interacting with a target audience. So helping with that transition to, yes, you just need a job and you just need to make money and you've got to start paying off those student loans ASAP, 100%. But if you can find a way to connect that job that you're applying for versus just mass applying to every single job on Handshake or LinkedIn, finding the jobs that can connect with your values, with your non-negotiables, and then only applying to those can be, you have such a better chance of actually getting those jobs because you put more effort into it and really explain why that job or why that company aligns with your non-negotiables.
When you think of, yeah, and when you think about that, I mean, to Allie's point, like, I can't tell you how often when I work with clients or pros and they're like, and I say, well, what do you want to do? What's your next career like? And they're like, I don't know, Joy, anything's going to be great. Well, that's not helpful, right? And we have to make it as easy as possible for people to help us. And we are in a society where asking for help, there's a lot of emotions that are attached to asking for help. So right off the bat, let's help Gen Z respond with things that can be helpful rather than saying, oh, I don't really know. If somebody asks me, well, Joy, what do you want to do? I might not know exactly the company that I want to work for, but I know I want to make an impact. And what that looks like for me is I'm looking for a mission-driven organization who fosters creativity, is going to allow me to be strategic and values communication. And if I'm telling that to you, if Allie is my future recruiter and she's like, oh, great, well, we can do that in this role. Or if it's just a friend or a networking event and Allie's like, oh, you know what? I know somebody who's mission driven and you should talk to this person or check out that organization. And all of a sudden, our ability and our network just grew. And so it might be a 2-for-1, right? We get the job, but we also get a job that we're going to be excited about. And again, throughout the process, when we're talking about ourselves, when we're pitching ourselves, when we're answering questions of what we can do, we're flipping the conversation about what we've done and the impacts that we've made. It's not, I think I could do this in my future. I can learn. I'm a fast learner. I'll learn it real quick. No, well, let me tell you how I've done that. I built an app to connect the dots and make it as easy as possible for other students to connect. And I'd love to do that for you. So again, it's helping Gen Z connect, as Ali said, connect the dots, make it as easy as possible for people to help them. And rather than, what's the easiest thing to talk about, right? We all get on a Zoom. Past 2.5 years, we've all gotten on these Zoom calls. We might not know each other. We're not really friends. What's the easiest thing to talk about? The weather, right? What relevance does the fact that it's 80 degrees in Phoenix today have any impact on my ability to make an impact in your organization? Absolutely none, right? So we're talking about the weather and then we awkwardly transition to the topic at hand. Generally, it's an interview and it's like, okay, well, let's go down the list of what are you good at? What strengths do you have? What weaknesses? When was that growth moment? In that moment, we can say, I'm so excited because I built this app. We can use our non-negotiables to say, when somebody says, well, how are you doing today? Or, what made you apply to this job? Well, you know what? I had a friend that told me about you. They mentioned this organization and they talked about how mission driven it was. And what's really important to me when I think about my next career move is I want a mission driven organization who's going to make an impact and allow me to be strategic and creative. Oh, interesting. Well, what does that look like for you? What does that mean? Well, when I think about creativity, I went above and beyond to think through how can I do what I did? I went above. If I'm talking in Nora's perspective, Nora went above and beyond her general core classes and she went and took classes in different schools. So I did that. So great. I want to make it as easy as possible for other people to do that. And from an employer's perspective, all of a sudden we're hearing about Nora's excitement for building relationships and collaborating with others that go beyond just her swim lane. And from the organization standpoint, great, I want that. I want somebody who can do that. So again, this is it might seem like a very overwhelming exercise, but it's really short and sweet and simple. It really gets us focused in on what's important to us, not based on what we think we can do, not based on the pipe dream of, I want to be an astronaut or I want to be a ballerina. But it gets us focused in what have we enjoyed in our past experiences, whether that's professional, personal, volunteer, etc. Where do I thrive in the time that I'm spending? I love coaching. I love talking with people and helping them brainstorm what are the possibilities. So if that's what I love, I want to make sure that I am doing that for as much of my day-to-day as possible. Because if I'm not doing that, then I'm like, oh, this is awful, right? And we're not engaged, then we're job searching all over again. And again, when we think about, we all know that it is tough to get a job, right? We have to sell ourselves and our skills and our impacts. Organizations no longer really care about what you think you can do. They care about what you have done. So I know we talked a lot about this today. It's an easy task, and we're so excited to continue to work with you and partner with you on what that looks like in your schools. And so there's a lot of ways that we can partner together and work together. So we'd love to answer any more.
We've got a lot of questions coming through, so I want to make sure we have time for questions, Joy. So make sure to put your questions, everyone, in the Q&A, and we will address that. Or like if you're dealing with something specific in your school or with a student, let's get Joy's genius brain on it and start tackling it. We'll also put Calendly links in the chat, as well as access to our webinars, so that if you want to continue the conversation after this, we're able to, because I know we've only got like 20 more minutes to go, 15 more minutes or so, but I want to make sure that we are able to get to everyone's questions. So Joy, and just so I'll read out the question to you, and then we can tackle it that way, if that works, just so everyone can know which question we're addressing, and I don't know if they can see it. So Shelby asked, are you seeing faculty at colleges being more intentional in helping students connect the dots to what they are learning and doing in the classroom to the world of work? Joy, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
It doesn't matter. We can tag team them.
You go for it.
Yeah, I would say generally, yes, that is the intention. A lot of the faculty that we work with and speak to, that's their intention, but they're overwhelmed, right? When you think about your own caseload of how many students you are trying to help and navigate what they want to be and what they're looking for in their careers, sometimes that goal doesn't happen. So it turns into, okay, well, let's go through the checkbox of you need a resume, you need a cover letter, you need to learn how to pitch yourself. So I think the intention is there, but the logistical bandwidth sometimes gets lost in the muck. And so when we think about, if you start your conversations leveraging what's important to you, let's really drill down on your non-negotiables. That can trickle in. Okay, great. So let's research some jobs that are in alignment. Let's go through each step of the process. Allie, feel free to chime in if you have.
So just one additional note to that. So for my 12 years of hiring, recruiting, and managing entry-level hires, I was seeing that gap. I was seeing that students were not able to understand what they had learned in the classroom and how that then translates. They're getting awesome communication skills and some really great soft skills, but then how do you transition that into how I work with my manager or how I show up to a meeting? Because it's different. Your manager is treating you really different than your professor did. And that transition has always been hard. That's not a Gen Z problem, but it's just the transition of life that happens. And to really prepare students for that transition is exactly what Ampersand was created for. So yes, we're talking to them about how to apply for the job, but then also like how to take notes in a meeting, which is really different than how to take notes in a classroom, how to talk to your manager that you're about to miss a deadline, and then what to actually do when you did miss that deadline. Because again, it's really different how you talk to your manager about that versus how you talk to a professor about that. And so our asynchronous curriculum is exactly training young professionals across the country, on how to make that transition, and the actual hard skills like Excel 101 and some social media tips and what the different titles in an organization are and why the CRO is working with the CEO and the head of product and the project manager, what everyone's doing and how they interact with each other. All of that is part of that to help make a smoother transition into the workforce. Okay, we've got a lot more questions. It's like hard to keep up with all of this. So another question that came through the Q&A is, what do you suggest doing if the salary is not included in the company's job posting, but you want to find out that information before you apply?
Yeah, I would say Glassdoor is a great resource for thinking through salary. I know there's some hit and miss perceptions of Glassdoor. I would also think about doing those informational interviews and I know we all get a little bit murky when we start talking about money. And that's one of the things that through the curriculum at Ampersand, we help them have these conversations, that it doesn't put it on a pedestal of like, oh, we got to save it to the very end, and then we're going to talk about money. So it goes exactly to that question of bringing that fact finding up front, so that we know, again, is this job worth it? If we're not going to be paid our worth, then what does it matter? In addition, are there things that can be subsidized for salary, right? If the salary is at par, but what else is important to them? Maybe they value remote work. Maybe they value being able to have a learning and growth plan. So again, this exercise can really help identify, in addition to the salary, what else is important, so that when you are negotiating, you can say, okay, I know that what's really important to me, and if we think back to Nora, is my curiosity and my learning and growth. So I recognize that, you've said that we can't negotiate my salary upwards, but would you be willing to, could you pay for 1 week of learning and development at X conference?
Great. Patrice asked a question that I am so passionate about. How does Ampersand address the needs of candidates with seen and unseen disabilities? Many entry-level jobs have requirements that are full of barriers at the front door. We totally understand and are so passionate about this issue, right? And so we, first off, our curriculum and our platform is designed, we've had blind, deaf, narcolepsy, physical disabilities as well. We are not trained in those things. So I want to be very clear that that is not our core, I don't know the right word, but we are not the experts. There are experts out there, and we are constantly getting more training on how we can improve ourselves in handling various disabilities and mental health issues. And so we're working on that to improve that within our curriculum. And we work with various nonprofits around the country who help with those job placement skills as well, to supplement if we're lacking somewhere. And we have been able to get them roles, people with various disabilities, especially through remote internship opportunities, so that, and the business doesn't even know. And there's some incredible case stories of professionals who have gone through the program, were in a wheelchair, and we didn't know, their boss didn't know, and they were able to get experience on their resume that was outside of the disability community, because they were just like anyone else in a remote internship experience, and changed the trajectory of their entire career. And so there's so many stories like that are so wonderful, and something that we are incredibly passionate about. I won't say there are organizations that are specifically focused on that, which we're not, but we are working to build more partnerships to enhance our abilities in that realm. Quick question about support for Gen Z international students that I'll quickly address. Our platform is open, and all the curriculum, of course, is accessible to international students. Our business partners, we cannot guarantee that we can match them with an internship if they do not have the ability to work in the US. So we just can't guarantee that the business will actually sponsor that student. But there's some situations that we've worked with schools where the school is handling that sponsorship. And so in that case, we would love to figure out how we can best help that individual find a paid internship.
There's a question of, can you talk more about about Gen Z specifically in relation to these strategies? And you referenced the slide at the beginning. So if we want to pull up this, I think it's the about Gen Z slide.
Here we go. Yeah. Do you want to address that, Joy?
Sure. So again, we really think through of what are they looking for? What's important to them? They're tech savvy, but they're craving that human interaction. when we think about them being an entrepreneurial. So we give them a lot of information about what's out there. How are organizations structured? How do you navigate each part of the process and identify what, as Ali mentioned earlier, what are all the things that they need to be professional in the workforce? So it's not just about the job search, but it's also like, once they actually get the job, how do you show up on time? How do you manage up? How do you ask for a mentor? So we really think through the pipeline of job searching, but also how to be professional once you get the job.
I'm going to address another question that was related to this slide that someone asked about the entrepreneurialism. So 62%, it is said, want to start their own business. Now, there's all the side hustles and all of that I think are wonderful, in Etsy shops. And I think that a lot of that enhances the entrepreneurialism because it's so accessible and available. Now, 62% are not going to be successful entrepreneurs. I hate to say it, but like that's just the case. Not everyone has it in their blood to be a true entrepreneur. So the way that we translate this is they want to be independent. They want to be in control of the way that they are handling their day-to-day, and they think they want to be their own boss. Great. So let's treat them like that as much as possible. You know, like they still haven't had a job before. So we try to work with our business partners to go into a management situation with an intern or an entry-level hire, understanding this person wants to be my boss, wants to be the boss. They want to be an entrepreneur. And that's just a little different in how you talk to them about their day-to-day tasks. That not necessarily just, you know, the way that it used to be done of like, here's your 15 tasks for the day, just do it and tell me when they're done. But rather interacting and explaining the value of the purpose of that task to the overarching organization so that they feel a part of what they're doing and how that contributes to the overall organization. Also, as part of it, they're going to have these side hustles. They're going to be, you know, making something on nights and weekends to sell in their Etsy shop, or, you know, driving Uber or something to that effect. And so understanding that also with the way that we prepare them for the workforce, so that if that's something that's super important to them, that they have the time and the space to work on their jewelry business, then you may not get the most money, you know, in your next job. You may need something that isn't necessarily completely aligned with every single one of your non-negotiables, because you do just need a job in that sense. And your real passion and the thing that's going to make you come alive is the jewelry making in the nights and weekends. So, you know, it's just a conversation that you can have with them when talking about those non-negotiables. Is a non-negotiable for you that entrepreneurialism? And if so, how do you incorporate that into the rest of your career search? While I was talking, did you find another question? Okay. Yeah, go for it, Joy.
There's a question of, I hear that I need at least $85,000 a year as a non-negotiable for soon to be grads. How do we talk with students about potentially unrealistic non-negotiables? That's a great question, because so often we think about what's important to us in our career as being the money, right? We think about, oh, I need this amount of money. And so the point of the non-negotiables goes beyond the salary. It goes beyond, I need X amount of money in order to survive or in order to support my lifestyle. It's getting them to be thoughtful of, I really value communication. I value strategy. I value creativity. And through the whole process, they're going to be able to talk about how they've made impacts in those realms. And ideally, on the other side, that's going to help them when it comes time to negotiation. So when we think about our non-negotiables, it does go beyond the actual money, because the money can come and go, right? Whether it's $85,000 or $500,000, like that's going to change based on the job, the industry, et cetera. When we think about what's really important to us, again, that's at our core, right? We might value money, but if our core value is money, well, what are all of the ways that can represent my desires? So as Ali just said, if they have a side hustle, or if there are other ways that they can bring in that income, they're going to talk through, well, let me tell you, I started this side hustle, or I started this project, et cetera. So we want them to go beyond just the actual number and think about what's the value. Why is that important to them? So I think that there's a question, Ali, can you speak to how this would work with Gen Z students that come from multicultural backgrounds?
Yeah, I'll combine that with Steve's question as well on how we motivate them when there may be, first generation with minimal support systems and from various backgrounds. So first off, in the platform, we have all multicultural backgrounds that we're connecting with as a way to truly connect with Gen Z, understanding they are the most diverse generation, and we need to look like them. We need to best connect with them. So that's how we handle it in the platform. And then currently, I think 42% of our professionals in the platform are first gen students. And so we try to be that support system for them. And this is what I light up about. This is what gets me out of bed, because I recognize how important internships are to setting you up for the next 10 years of income and career success. Yet 40% of young professionals in college today don't have internships and have never had internships because they don't know the importance. And that number is declining year over year because of they're taking more course load, they have to work off campus or whatnot. And so they don't even know the importance of an internship and how that sets them up for the next 10 years, especially if they're first gen or from some background that they aren't ingrained in that importance. So our goal is to be that support system to help connect them to the skills that they need in order to kind of be on par with others who might have that direct connection to paid internship opportunities through their parents or their friends or whatnot, and give them that access. So give them all the skills and the actual access to those paid internship opportunities that they don't necessarily know where to find elsewhere. And so we've had some questions come up of like, how does Ampersand actually do this? So for young professionals, it's totally free. They come onto the platform, they can get all of this knowledge, they can get all the coaching, and they can get the certification. And then after the certification, they get paired with the paid internship opportunities. Today, and for the rest of 2023, or for the rest of 2022, I think, it's free for the businesses to post jobs on our platform as well. It's a private jobs board. So like, unlike Handshake or other organizations out there, you can't just scroll through and see all the job postings. It's like a dating app. So when there's a match between the business and the professional, similar to Bumble, where the female makes the first move on Bumble, the business makes the first move to schedule an interview with their top candidates. We don't give the businesses every single candidate. We give them the top 3 to 5 matches based off of their specific job posting. And that whole algorithm is using all of the information that we've gathered on the professionals throughout their experience in the Ampersand platform. So again, unlike like LinkedIn or, other platforms where you put out here's who I am, and just like a resume, we see how they present themselves and we coach them through how to present themselves. But then we also have coaches who are saying this professional, comes from this kind of background, and it's more than they're just representing. Yeah, they don't have any internship experience. They had to work at their parents' gas station nights and weekends and right after school. And they're so driven. We're teaching them how to communicate that about themselves, but there's also just a piece of that goes then into the algorithm and matches that individual with a business owner who needs someone who's just like really driven and really scrappy and just going to get to work. And we know this individual, because of their background, is the perfect candidate for this particular role. So I hope that explains it. And so how do we make money? It is through university partnerships, where we help to augment the career services and put your students on our platform and give you the outcomes reporting on how they're all doing, so that you can then take that, plug that into different outcomes reports for rankings or for different things within the university.
So, I know we have quite a few more questions, and we're so excited.
I think we get a download of all of these questions, and so we will address these individually with you guys because we are out of time. So we'll reach out to you and answer your questions, and would love to schedule time one-on-one to answer any of these questions if any more pop up as you're thinking throughout the weekend. Joy, you want to close us out?
Yes, well, we're going to actually thank you so much for joining us for today's conversation. It's so exciting. We recognize that you all have a lot on your plates, and you're on the front lines of helping the next generation really figure out what they want to do in their next career. So hopefully you found some nuggets of wisdom in today's conversation. As Ali just mentioned, we will follow up and we're continuing to partner and work with you. We're so excited. And now we're going to turn it back over to Nace to close us out. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali Danziger and Joy Hargan and Ampersand for a very informative session. And thank you participants for attending today's webinar. The archive, along with step-by-step instructions on how to receive these items, will be made available within 3 to 5 business days. Please note that the PowerPoint presentation will be made available following today's webinar. We would like to thank you for attending today's session. This officially concludes the webinar, and you may now sign off.